Guys, what's up? This is Mike from Taco Moto Co. and Baja Taco Tours. Today we are going to do a Mythbusters show, a Moto Mythbusters. Man, I can't even begin to tell you how many emails, questions, calls I get from guys who have seen something on the interwebs. They've watched some YouTube channel or one of their bros, but not a pro, has told them about some trick mod, some super duper upgrade, some fancy farkle that they got to put on their bike, and it's going to make them like huge gobs of horsepower. It's going to turn their single cylinder 500 into like a 70 horsepower monster. So many myths out there, so many legends. We're going to poke a bunch of holes in those today if we can. And as I go through these, I'm just trying to go off memory and do the best I can, but I'll probably forget some things. I'll probably get some data points wrong. And if you want to, you can flame up in the comments section. Let me know if you want to do a deeper dive into any one of these particular things. I think some of these things are worth a standalone video so that it could be really exhaustively explored and looked at. But today I'm just going to give you like a big 10,000 foot overview of as many of these things as we can and what they do, why they're on your bike, why you should consider maybe taking them off or leaving them on, changing them, upgrading them, modding them, all of these different things. So let's start with probably the biggest offender on your bike. So, you know, there's this really common issue out there that guys will buy their EXCF or their FE, and they just don't feel like the performance is there, warranted, commensurate to like the fact that they have this 500 horsepower bike. And so why do they feel like the power is restricted? Why do they feel like this street bike is really choked down? And the reality is that's exactly the case. So let's start with the single biggest mod, single biggest improvement you can make on your bike in terms of like power and performance, and that would be the exhaust system. And we don't have to get too crazy with what we do to the exhaust. There's just some simple things that we need to understand about what the exhaust is doing on your stock bike, what a modified exhaust will do, and why you may or may not want to do any of these things. So let's take a look at the end cap. This is off of, here is the stock muffler. Here's what it looks like in the Husqvarna version right here. This is on a 17 through 19 bike. This is the stock slip-on for 17 through 19 bike right here. And so let's break this thing down. As far as the can, the slip-on, you have a very typical and traditional type of can here. Any of the aftermarket mufflers are going to give you this exact same piece. It might be different materials, exotic materials. It might weigh less. The dimensions might be a little bit different, but all of them are essentially this component right here. This is the muffler. And then here's the inside, and it's packed with fiberglass. This is sound dampening. And so the shape of the muffler, the amount of packing, the density they're packing, all these things contribute to sound and also resonance dampening inside of the chamber, and that aids in power, and it moves the power torque profile around. So you can play around with how the bike feels and where the power hits based on a lot of the attributes of the muffler. And so this is the stock one, and it works really, really well. I'm a big fan of stock KTM mufflers. I have no problem with them whatsoever. I run a ton of them. I replace a ton of them, but I also like them a lot. I think the only complaint that's valid with this is weight, which is true. And the main thing that is heavy on this is this big stainless steel inlet port down here. This is super heavy. Also, the end cap out here is super heavy too. These are just kind of beefy stainless steel components, and they weigh a ton. So if you upgrade to an Acro or to an FMF, you are really getting lighter entry points and exit points on that muffler. You're also maybe going to get some exotic materials like titanium here. So again, nothing wrong with this at all, other than probably the weight. That's the only real ding against it. So what's happening with your stock end cap? You've got this air dam down here, and this thing fits inside of this open port right here. You've got an ID of 43 millimeters. Down here, it's a little bit bigger because of the pipe, but you can't really see this, but it transits from this, I think, is about 47 down to the actual inlet airflow chamber area of 43, and then back here on the end, it's 43. This little plug right here, this guy is 35. And so going from 43 to 35, that's an 80, I think my math is right, you can double check me on this, super nerds, 81% obstruction. So if I fit this thing in here, very hard to see. I'll see if I can get some still pictures, but basically these two things slip into each other and you've obstructed the airflow about 81%. Okay, so that's huge. Then back here, you've got this perf screen. I have no idea what these IDs are on the holes and how many, and doing the math on that. I ain't gonna do it. Somebody out there probably will. Now, take that as a personal challenge. But what you do have is a 27 millimeter outlet port. So you've got potentially 43 millimeters here, and then it chokes down to 27, and so that's a 40% reduction. So you've got, with this right here, this is really your offender. If you are complaining about your bike's lack of power, this is it. If you do something about this, you will change that dramatically. Now, a lot of guys will say, and it's valid, that if you just remove this guy down here on the end, you will dramatically improve the performance and sound. Really quick, sound is not horsepower. Guys will think that their bike is faster when it's louder. That's placebo power, and it's a vector, but it's not reality. But that's okay. A lot of guys believe in things that aren't true, so I'm not gonna dispel your beliefs, flat earthers, and whatever you wanna hold dear. That's cool. So again, the common myth out there is that if you pull this plug here at the end, that you'll have more power, and that's true. So that's not really a myth, but it's not all the power that is available. So if you did something about the perf screen, that'll give you a little more. You're still limited though, 27 millimeters on this outlet port. So really that's your factor. So there are some ways you can improve this here, but what you've got is this really nice 43 millimeter outlet port available. So what are some of your options? Our favorite option is a Pro Moto billet end cap. Why do we like this? We like it because this outlet port is 43 millimeters. And so you've essentially made yourself a straight pipe. And this will bolt right onto the end here. I think I've got that upside down. Oh, this is for a 20, and this is a different year. So these don't mate up, but you get the idea. This thing right here will give you straight through. Now your pipe, your muffler, has the ability to flow straight out with no obstructions. Pro Moto billet gives you an optional, like a witch's hat. This is the spark arrestor. This is the spark arrestor on your stock muffler. So if you remove this plug, you've defeated the spark arrestor. So if you ride anywhere where that's an issue, that's gone if you do anything to violate the integrity of this. Now if you go to a Pro Moto, you're going to get a spark arrestor, and it's optional whether or not you use it. It just slips in there and bolts on. Very cool setup. This has no impact on power. We've tested this on blind ride tests, and we've also dyno run these, and there is zero impact to power. So don't be one of those guys who think that by not having this in, you're going to gain a little power. You're not. We recommend completely that you just run this. Just put this in and leave it in. One of the reasons why we like the Pro Moto also is it's so much lighter than the stock. It's also really trick looking. You can get these in different colors. You can have these anodized in different colors. It's replaceable if you damage this or jack it up, or any of these components are all individually replaceable. And so we're a big fan of the Pro Moto. We use these a lot in all of our bikes. Let's talk about one other thing with the stock muffler. You're not going to really be able to see this too well, but down inside of there, about halfway or so, somewhere down in here, there are these two cones that are welded together inside of this pipe, and that's the resonator. The resonator is a device that also aids in the acoustical balance of the stock can. Not only does it dampen the acoustics, but it also aids in low-end power. So a lot of guys on the interwebs will say, knock that out, knock that screen out, and that may be a valid option for you if you're running like a supermoto setup. So this would be a prescription for a guy who wanted full wide open power. He didn't care about low end, because you will sacrifice low end. When you remove this, you will give up low end. The bike will rev fast and blow through the low end power really quickly if you are trying to use your bike for off-road, trails, let's say single track or hard enduro type of riding, and you remove that, you will give up low end power, low end torque, and you will blow through the power band really, really quickly. And so my general rule of thumb on this is if you're an off-road rider and low end power matters to you, and you want that grunt, you want that pull, you want that torque down low, and you want a slower build on the power, leave it in. So what I would do if I was setting up my bike for trails, this stock cap, or this stock can right here, I would leave that in, and I would switch out to the Pro Moto billet end cap, and that's my formula for off-road. Now, if I was on-road, supermoto, flat track, if I was gonna ride a lot of Forest Service roads, and I didn't care about sound absolutely will go up. I don't know to what extent, but this pipe will become incredibly loud if you knock that out, and you will lose the low end. So if neither of those things matter to you, then go ahead and knock that thing out. It's pretty difficult to do. You can't just take some kind of rod and go in there and smash it out, although there are guys who will tell you they do that, and they probably damage and they might create some problems with the perf tube going through the center of this pipe. So it's tricky, but it's totally doable. If you do that, you end up with like a, where is my FMF? You'll end up with what you get with like an FMF pipe, which is a straight through pipe. Hello, can you see that? So there is no perf screen. There's no resonator down here inside of this can. This pipe is a bit lighter. The material down here is thinner, smaller. It's tidier. This pipe weighs less than the stock muffler does, but all of the same attributes and characteristics are the same. It's just a straight through pipe. This one also happens to be the same ID as the Pro Moto, so 43 millimeter. Yeah, 43 millimeter all the way through, just like on the Pro Moto. So there is basically, I like FMF, don't get me wrong. I like bling, I like candy, I like the blue, I like the carbon. This thing is sexy. It's 500 bucks. If you want to get a $500 pipe that's going to weigh more, but will essentially equal the performance, keep your stock muffler on there, throw on a Pro Metal billet end cap, decide if you do or do not want to keep that resonator inside here, and you've got very comparable products with each other. So that's my myth busting on mufflers. You can turn your stock one into an FMF for a fraction of the cost, but arguably the two look very different from each other. This is sexy as hell, boys. When you pull up at the right area and you got one of these, guys know you mean business. This is a bit of a sleeper option, but the power and performance are going to be very comparable, very, very comparable. So that's the Resonator, Pro Moto cap, or, there's other caps. Enduro Engineering makes a good cap. There's a few of them out there, but the idea is all the same. Okay, so that's probably all we're going to talk about with the cap and the muffler. Let me just add one, maybe last thing with the Pro Moto. This will increase the sound. Your bike will be louder. If you don't like that, you don't like that four-stroke big bore thumper sound, a lot of guys don't, it's very fatiguing. When you ride your bike and you don't have ear protection in, you will fatigue yourself out. Sound, decibels, wind noise, engine noise, four-stroke thumper noise, it's really taxing. So what some guys will do is they'll pop in this little silent down turn. What that does is it shoots, it's very effective. It manages where the sound is focused, and then it turns it down, it pushes it down. So instead of the sound coming out here in a wave, in a cone wave, and really getting at the rider, what this does is it focuses it and then puts it down at the ground. And so very, very effective with focusing the sound and then reducing sound. We like these a lot. If you need to reduce, and that's a straight through. It's the same diameter. All it does is just change the angle. If you need to kill some dBs, you can get the ultra silent insert. This guy is a little smaller ID, but notice all these little perf holes around the outside too. Some guys will even drill out, they sort of give you like these other ones that are partially drilled. Some guys will drill those out, and you can increase the airflow almost to what you have the 43 without it. We like to run these just as they come, and they do an even better job of reducing sound and then focusing it and sending it down towards the ground. So either one of these are a great option if you, here's what the inside of that looks like. If you need to reduce sound, kill some dBs, both of these do a really good job. And so these are our favorite setups as far as exhaust mods. Okay, so once you've changed your exhaust profile, you will absolutely and dramatically change the power, delivery, and feel of your bike. And because we're talking about fuel-injected bikes here, remember in the days of carburetors, whenever you would change anything with your intake, your exhaust on a carbureted bike, you needed to change jetting. Absolutely essential. Your bike would run lean. As we all know, these bikes run lean anyway, so we need to increase the fueling. Even if we don't make exhaust changes, these bikes benefit from fueling, increased fueling. If you do make exhaust change or intake changes, you have to, you must. It's essential that you improve fueling. There is a myth out there, we're going to bust this one. There's a myth out there that modifying the TPS will give you more fuel, and that is true in the extent that you are fooling the ECU into thinking that the throttle is continually open more than it really is, and the increase of airflow demands more fuel, and so the bike will fuel the intake stream richer because it's fooled into thinking that the throttle is open more. We have run air fuel gauges on bikes with TPS tweaks, and they run leaner through the mid-range and the top end. The TPS hack does a pretty good job of increasing fueling down low. Once you get to the mid to upper range, you are now super lean. You're a little less lean than the stock setup was. However, it is an absolute myth and a fool's chase to think that doing exhaust and intake mods and then fueling that with the TPS trick is effective and essential. And you believe what you want, but it doesn't do it, and the air-fuel ratios are off. Plus, you're no longer at 0 and 100% wide-open throttle. And so you've thrown off your, in the lookup tables in the stock map, you've thrown off your ignition and your fueling ratios from each other. So it's just a terrible idea. Don't do it. If your TPS is off stock setting, we're going to talk about the ways that you can properly and correctly fuel your bike. And one side note, before I forget this, if you put on an aftermarket ECU, you're going to need to account for the TPS. So if you have left it alone and it's stock, then the Vortex, so the Vortex ECU, where's this guy? Vortex ECU, we're going to dive into this guy later. This little critter, if you put this on your bike and your TPS has been changed from stock, you have to set it back. I know in some of the earlier versions of the firmware and earlier versions of the Vortex, there was that little procedure you would do where you would, I don't remember, you'd press the start button and the kill button at the same time and rub your belly and chew gum and walk backwards and play a Ouija board or something, and it would zero out the TPS. With the newer units and the newer firmwares, that is not an option, and if you open up one of these, if you bought one of these recently, there is no instruction sheet, there's no description of that. They've dropped that. What they need you and want you to do is to set your TPS to stock, to factory setting. So if you've put one of these on your bike and you don't know where your TPS is, or you know that it's been changed, you need to reset that back down to factory stock setting on the TPS. If you go with the Get, with one of the Athena Gets, and you have the Wi-Fi set up, then you can zero out the TPS in the app. So you can leave the TPS out of spec, and the app and it'll self-compensate for that within range. Now some guys crank their TPSs to ridiculous settings, and so there are limits to what this can account for. But the Get is able to accommodate your TPS tweaks and then to zero out for them. So that's the two things about the TPS. So the TPS hack, total myth, don't do it, put it back to spec, fuel your bike properly. So how should you do it if you're on a budget, or you don't want to get too high tech, or you don't need all the power that the aftermarket ECUs offer, or you just want something super simple, almost plug and play? You can go with a JD tuner, a Debunked EJK. Here's another one, sourced. I bought this from a guy on the internet. These are all the same box. Every one of these is exactly the same, and they're made by Debunked. Okay, so Debunked is a company out of Montana, and they are the inventors, the originators of this little plug-and-play module that they call the EJK, Electronic Jet Kit. So essentially what this does is this plugs in series with your fuel injector. So one of these goes to the injector, one of these plugs go to the computer. The signal to fire the injector for the pulse width, the on time of the injector, is interrupted or intercepted by this little guy. And so there are 5 channels, 5 throttle positions that this thing will interpret, and then you can up or down the fueling in those 5 circuits. So it is exactly like when you would change the jetting, you would screw around with needle and clip position, needle size, main, pilot, all the jets, you would adjust and change those and calibrate those to give your bike, your carburetor, different fueling through the sweep. This does the exact same thing. It does a really good job, super easy to install, low cost. These are like $225. It's a no-brainer. A really great mod to up power your bike that is legit, no myth here, is to throw on like a Pro Moto billet end cap on your stock muffler, put on a Debunked EJK or the JD. It's the same box, just different stickers, and you will now fuel your bike correctly and properly, and you will gain huge amounts of performance. Your bike will run cooler. Everything will be better. The longevity and durability of your top end will improve and increase. So I am an absolute fan of the Pro Moto cap and a Debunked EJK for a guy who is not a racer, a guy who doesn't need a bike that's a screamer. He doesn't want all the bells and whistles of a Get, of a Vortex. Very low cost, very easy to do. Any garage DIY mechanic can do this stuff in a weekend, in a couple hours. It's super easy. We love this mod. I'll do another video later that goes in depth into each one. So I will do a dedicated video on the Debunked, and then the Vortex, and then the Get, and talk about who might want these and why you might want one of these devices on your bike, depending on what kind of rider you are, budget, lots of variables and considerations. But we're just poking holes in some of the myths out there. So this is a really, really simple, low-cost way to correct the bike and get it fueled correctly, properly. Big myth, busted right here. This combination will not make 70 horsepower. Putting on a Debunked EJK and an end cap is not going to make 70. I wish it was true. Trust me, for the low cost of this, if you could just bolt these 2 things onto your bike and get 70, holy crap, that would be an amazing. We're talking about a stock engine running pump gas, unmodified. Okay, we haven't done camshafts, we haven't done high compression heads, high compression pistons, we haven't ported, we haven't done any of that. It's just, what a myth. You're not going to get that. The stock bike makes 53 horsepower. I'm sorry, 43. So this is a 2020. A 2020 makes 43 horsepower. We've done that ourselves. We've had third-party dyno shops get that number. Snow bike guys, my Baja Race Buddy teams. We're all getting 43. We get 43 horsepower out of a stock 2020 bike. All hot rodded up on pump gas with no internal engine mods. Everybody can get anywhere 54, 55, 56, 57. We're all getting in the same range. That's what we get. Anybody who tells you otherwise, it's a myth. I wish it was true. For example, Lyndon Poskett, he makes some great, I think they're 790s, his rally bikes, his twin-cylinder rally bikes, hot bikes, amazing machines. They make about 70 horsepower. So if it was true that you could get 70 out of a single-cylinder stock motor bike running pump gas with a tuner and an end cap, I would be all over that. Not true. So great product. We love it. We sell a lot of these. We really, really like them. Just understand what they are, and a lot of fairy tales out there about some of this stuff. So that is our take on the Debunked EJK, JD Tuner, power module. You could get these from, I think, FMF, Polaris. You'll see these. A lot of companies will sell these and put a different sticker on here. They're all a Debunked EJK. So myth busted. Anywhere you see this device, this little computer module right here, this is a Debunked EJK, regardless of what sticker is on there. And this is a fuel correction device. It's a wonderful little product. We like them. Okay, so that's that. Let's see, why don't we talk about the Vortex? The Vortex ECU is an absolute wonderful little box. This thing is a plug-and-play device as long as your TPS has been set to factory spec. You put this on your bike, and you now have the ability to select, and I have the sheet here from Vortex, On the front here, you've got a map switch, you've got 10 maps, and then you have 3 fuel trims. This guy plugs onto your bike, and then depending on where you have this switch, you are in one of the 10 maps. And some of the names of the maps are power maps, so map 1, map 2 and 3, they call those the Enduro Traction map, and there's 2 versions, 1 and 2, and those are pretty good. Map 4 is torque map, and that's for like heavy sand, high demand on the engine. You've got 5 and 6 are a power map, and that's going to take special fuel, and that's for modified engines. And map 1, position 7 is map 1. Again, it's just a slightly different version. 7 and 1 are kind of the same. I think 7 lets you run a little lower octane. So 7 is the best power map on sort of like sour gas, maybe third world gas. And then map 8 is another version of map 2. Map 9 is, I'm not sure exactly what map 9 is, neutral fuel map. I've never played around with that one. And then map 0 is launch control. So these are all different map settings that you can play around with. This is a great box. What else can I say about the Vortex? You can do your own research. This, coupled with any of the other exhaust modifiers, is fantastic. Put this on with your ProMobility end cap stock muffler, put it on with FMF. You're going to absolutely transform the feel and performance of your bike. Wonderful little guy. We love these. That's probably all I'm going to say about the Vortex. Get ECU. The Get ECU has all kinds of little tricks up its sleeve. When you get the RX1 kit, it comes with the ECU itself, a Wi-Fi module, and then a map switch. Oh, the Vortex has a map switch too. It's a extra cost add-on, and when you select between the 2 maps, you're running map 1 all the time in map position 1, and then toggling it to map position 2 gives you whatever you put on the rotary dial. So that's how that works on the Vortex. How it works on the Get is, again, you have a map switch which is included, and then you're toggling between the 2 maps. We at Taco Moto have developed a big portfolio of maps for the Get. Amazing maps. We've run these in Baja. We've raced with these. These are on snow bikes. These are on supercross bikes. We've put these boxes and our maps out there all over in all kinds of terrain and all kinds of rider demands, and they're absolutely insane. They're wonderful. You can read about us on Thumper Talk, KTM Talk, Facebook groups, wherever you see that guys are talking about performance and engine mods. They're talking about us as well, and we get great feedback. We do everything we can to make sure your bike runs exactly like you want, or we will make it right. Whatever we need to do to make you happy, to get you performance that you're after, we'll do it. So the Get is a fantastic little ECU. It has a ton of features. I'm not going to go into those in this little video, but this is a tuning product in conjunction with what you get out of the Vortex that will change. These two are equal with each other, and that's going to change ignition and fuel. These are faster computers than the stock ECU. This is the fastest computer of all, so the processing speed is the fastest in this little box. This one also happens to have a barometric pressure sensor. You've got the Wi-Fi module. There's just all kinds of crazy things you can do with this. Fantastic product. Here's different versions. So this is for some of the older bikes. You've got 2-stroke model right here. This is the GPA option if you're doing motocross, and it gives you launch control and all kinds of different features. Here's a mode selector switch for the GPA if you're doing that. So the Get is just an incredibly feature-rich and widely adaptable platform to base your performance mods on. We like these a ton. There also is a, for the 2-stroke guys, for the fuel-injected bikes, there is I didn't bring that kit, there is a fuel injector relocator. It will take the 2 injectors off the sides of the ports and put them in the air intake stream. So just a quick word on the 2-stroke EFI bikes. You know, the reason that KTM went to the EFI is for emissions, plain simple. They needed to meet the Euro 4 standard and soon the Euro 5 standard. And they did that through fuel injection. Having the fuel on the side ports is the most efficient in terms of combustion and exhaust. It is not the most effective or efficient in terms of power and performance and smoothness through the throttle range. And so Athena has, they understand that, and they have in their kit option for the 2-stroke fuel injected bikes, an injector relocator plate, and that moves the injectors from the side, put them in the airstream, and that dramatically improves the feel, performance, the trackability of the two-stroke bikes, the fuel-injected two-strokes. So I'm not going to go into that other than what I just said there, but that's a dramatic improvement in power and performance on the two-strokes. Athena is just all over the place with their development, R&D. It's an incredible company, and their stuff is great. Okay, so let's talk about intake. We've basically covered exhaust. We've covered engine management devices. And so let's talk about, oh, I did bring the fuel injector relocator. Yes. Okay, so two-stroke box. This is the injector plate right here. This mates underneath your reeds. And then it moves the two injectors here to the right there at the throttle body. And so this is all about power and performance. This is a huge gain when you put this, and here's the little plugs. These guys go into the side of the head where your injectors used to go. You have two of these, so you plug off and blank off the old injector spot, relocate them into the airstream. The ECU is included, and then we custom map that to your bike and your riding preferences and specifications. So that's that. Now let's talk about air intake. There is a huge myth out there that, well, so let's take one step back. On the EXC bikes, you have a set of intake reeds in the airstream. These are like two-stroke intake reeds. I did not grab one of those boots off one of the bikes, but if you take your air filter off, if you have a 17 plus EXC or FE, or even with the 20, if you have one of the new XCFW or FES bikes, which are, you know, we all thought those would be like off-road dirt bikes. I have another video that talks about that. Those are as not, let me say it carefully, they're not as restrictive as the EXCs because they have a slightly different exhaust end cap and the mapping is a little bit different. And you have mapping options. You have dealer available remap options for that bike if you switch to one of the factory approved dealer only Acra or FMF pipes. But you still have intake reeds, you still have the vapor recovery system, emissions system on it. You don't have the SAS pump, which is kind of cool on the 20 plus. You do on the 17 through 19. So I'm taking the long way around to tell you about the intake reeds. So the intake reeds, this does not have it, but if you take your air filter off your 17 through 20 bike and you look here, you'll have a set of pedal reeds that look like a two-stroke reeds on your four-stroke, which is very confusing to a lot of people. So the myth is that KTM put those on there to choke off our fun. The myth is that that's for emissions. There's a lot of ideas out there floating around. The technology of that, intake pedal reeds on the intake side of a four-stroke, not new at all. Honda used to play around with that back in the XR days. If you have an aggressive camshaft with overlap, intake overlap, which you get on your EXC and FE bikes, you get a tiny back pulse of air as the piston is coming up on the intake, on the compression stroke. The intake stroke is just finished. The intake valves are just closing, not quite fully closed yet. The piston is now coming up on the compression stroke. The intake valve has not yet completely closed, and there's a micro back pulse of air through the intake track before the intake valve completely closes. You can demonstrate that super effectively if I've had guys do this. You could drill a hole in your air boot, or on the 20 bikes, you could put on one of the cool aftermarket air boots that are vented, and we have those. Anything, let me just side note here, anything we've talked about, we have it available on tacomotoco.co. Happy to get you set up with any and all of this stuff. So there are guys who will put a piece of tissue paper over their air boot, air box cover, and they will run the bike, and you will just see that tissue paper kind of flutter in and out as that little back pulse of air pushes the piece of tissue paper away from the body panel, which is that little back rush of air. So what Honda used to do back in the day was they put intake pedals, reeds on the intake side of their XR bikes. And the reason they did it on a carburetor was because you would get the Venturi effect backwards through the carburetor, which would pick up a little air and suck that in on the next intake stroke. And it was like a double dip of fuel. You'd get it a a little backwards, and then you'd get the forward rush. And so you'd have this little rich double dip of fuel, which would cause low throttle angle bog off idle, and cough and stall too. You'd get a lot of stall outs because it was just super rich. So Honda remedied that. They could have tamed down the camshaft, and that would have solved it. Or what they did is they put intake pedals on the intake boot, and it was super effective. And so you can see the lineage and history. There are race teams who have experimented with this. You know, I did a lot of research one time, kind of diving down the rabbit hole of intake pedals on the 4-stroke bikes, and it's a thing. KTM didn't invent it. They didn't. They're not the first ones to have done it. And so they're doing it for that exact same reason, and they also are doing it for sound. Now, here's a myth. Then why don't the Euro bikes, why do the US bikes have it and the European bikes don't have it? Well, the guys at KTM went to college. They know what's going on. The guys and gals over there are pretty smart, and they've done market research, and they know that the US customer, the guys who buy these US bikes, are a different customer than the other global market buyers of these bikes. And each market has a different preference, different interests, different wants out of their machines. And so when a bike goes to a particular market, it has been customized and tailored for that market. And it's also trying to conform to any, emissions and sound standards that are also in that market. And in the US, we have emissions and sound drive-by tests. So the intake reeds, they do aid in sound. They dampen the intake track sound, but they also aid in trackability and low-end power delivery. So let me say it like this. It's what I tell guys all the time. If you're an off-road guy and you ride single track and trails and hard enduro, and you spend most of your throttle between 0 idle and let's say 40% or so, then my advice typically is leave the intake reeds in. If you're a wide open guy, an open desert guy, a super moto guy, a hot rod, flat tracker, if you love to spend more of your time at say above 45% throttle, then take them out. The bike performs differently with them in or out. I have guys who I have this conversation with, and they put them back in, and they like their bike better with them in. So depending on who you are, how you ride, there's no one size fits all. Here's a myth, that there's only one formula to get your bike, uncorked or desmogged or, wide open. And everybody, typically on the forums will say, well, throw an FMF and a Vortex on it. That's an absolute formula, which I like. I like that formula a lot. But is it the right formula for you? Or is wide open race map and wide open power band and super moto type power delivery your thing? If it is, then get a Vortex and an FMF for sure. If you ride differently, if you want your bike to feel differently or perform differently, then there's other ways that you should approach your bike setup. You should do this holistically and not just generically. So listening to your bros and not the pros gets you what it gets you. And I would hope that we can help you get what you want instead of what your buddy thinks he wants you to have, or maybe what he likes himself. So the intake boots. So what I have here are 2 different boots. Now you'll see there's a really big difference in the side profile. This is the motocross boot for the 450, and then this is the European spec boot for the 450-500. The difference here is the motocross boot has a linkage shock, and so a myth is that all you got to do if you want to get rid of the reeds and have a wide open intake is to go with the motocross boot. It will not work on the EXCs or the XCFWs because you have a PDS, and all of this interferes and rubs on the shock. I read and hear about guys who try to modify these. They shove them in there anyway. That's cool. You can do that. You can shove this in there and try to squeeze it all in and make it fit. More power to you. Or you can get from us one of the Euro versions. This is the Euro spec, and this will accommodate your PDS shock, and it will also give you a straight through shot. Now, do you need to open up your intake and have a straight shot boot like this? What's wrong with the US boot after you take the reeds out? If you measure the ID of the Euro boot here and the ID of the US boot with the reeds out, it is in volumetric terms about the same. And so switching over to the Euro boot is a fine mod. I have no problem with it. There are lots of guys who insist on doing this, and we have these, we carry these, we sell these, and I'm happy to support that. I will say this, it's a myth that this boot flows more air, because the reality is it kind of doesn't. It's also a myth that if you take out the intake reeds that you have to buy a velocity stack. As it happens, again, the guys who designed these bikes went to college, they're kind of smart. This whole intake tube is a velocity stack. So if you buy an aftermarket velocity stack and put it inside of your velocity stack, seems kind of redundant, but go ahead and do that if you believe that that will help you. I have no problem with crazy, funny, false beliefs. That's fine. Another false belief, another myth, is that you have to put a velocity stack in here if you take out your intake reeds because the vacuum will suck in the rubber. That is, I don't even know what to say about that. That's such a ridiculous false claim. There is not enough vacuum to do that. I did an experiment once where I duct taped off this, and then this is not that scientific, but I duct taped this off, and then I kind of felt this boot here. I did this, I knew the result would be what I found. But anyway, cranked the bike, tried to get the bike started. It kind of started, didn't really want to run, obviously no air. And trying to feel and determine if this boot flexed inward in any way possible. It did not. It absolutely did not. In fact, if you notice, they've got these sort of like little strengthening ribs in here. This, in my opinion, is absolute needless, but they put it in there anyway. I think what it really does is sort of like resist flex, which you don't want to have any flex in this boot laterally. So they've strengthened it, which is cool. So myth, you need a velocity stack to prevent this from collapsing. 100% myth. Myth, you need a velocity stack in your velocity stack. That's a myth. Myth that your intake reeds need to come out on every bike every time. Total myth. Another myth is that you need to upgrade to the Euro boot, that it's better than the US boot. That's a myth. But I will say this, there was one, I kind of like this argument. If you do take out the reeds on your US spec bike, it's very possible that you could do it and leave debris and small particles inside the intake track, and if you didn't clean those out, you could suck those into the motor. So what some guys will do is they'll just completely remove the US boot. They won't take the reeds out. They'll just remove the US boot, and they'll put on this Euro boot, and they'll keep that, and then if you ever sold your bike, you could hand the guy back the US boot completely intact and leave it up to him whether or not he wanted to swap it back out. Or I've had guys who will get the Euro boot and they'll swap them between the two, depending on what kind of riding they're doing, or they might experiment. Some guys like to experiment on their own between the two. And so those are all valid arguments and valid claims, which I am fine with all of those. So a bunch of myths there about that. Those are the facts on these boots. I only wish I would have had that US boot sitting here. Maybe I'll try to catch that in some other video in some other time. Okay, so that's the boots. Let's talk about throttle bodies. There are lots of throttle body mods out there. Whenever you mod your throttle body, basically all you're doing is increasing airflow. Twin Air has a throttle body mod, and this one we like. It's relatively low cost. Anybody can do this in your garage. You don't have to send your throttle body out to anybody, and it does have performance gains. So the biggest advantage of the Twin Air throttle body mod is that it gives you a much thinner, by a factor of 2 plus, it gives you a thinner butterfly plate and then a thinner machining to the bar here, the throttle body bar. So basically what this gives you, and it's probably impossible to see in this video, but we have still pictures of this on the website. You just get a thinner air dam. So, you know, when your throttle plate is closed, you're completely blocking the air. As you open it up, you're allowing air to pass through the inside of the throttle body, and any of this material that is presented to the airflow is an obstruction. And the stock obstruction is considerably larger than on this Twin Air aftermarket upgrade kit. So by doing this, you just allow more airflow. This just increases airflow. So if you're a wide open guy, a desert guy, super moto, or you know, again, you're one of those guys who really like all the power, full power potential and availability of more wide open throttle angles, then this is a nice mod to do. And again, you don't have to send this out to anybody. You can do this at home in your garage. These are really nice pieces, and it's relatively low cost. So this is a DIY solution to what guys will send their throttle bodies out and be modded for. You can do this at home. Great kit. We use these. We sell these. They're fantastic. A couple hours and you can have this installed on your bike. So that's the Twin Air throttle body mod kit. You can do this on any. They make these for the Supermoto, not the Supermoto, but the MX bikes with the bigger throttle body. Oh, and the other thing I might mention is on the motocross bike, they give you a down converter. So what this thing is this drops the ID of your throttle body. So air velocity matters, and as you change the air velocity into your motor, you can change power, performance, power delivery. And so on the larger throttle bodies, they give you, I think this is a 44 ID, and then the OD, outside diameter, and then the inside diameter is 42. So you go from 44 to 42 on this with this little insert. Our EXC and FE bikes have a smaller throttle body anyway. So you wouldn't use this on a street bike. You would use this optionally if you had the motocross bike, but you would use this guy on our FE bikes and EXC bikes and XCW and FES bikes. Okay, so throttle body kit, that's a real deal. So one of the okay, so let's talk about air filters. One of the things that you may want to consider doing on your intake side is changing out your air filter housing, your air filter cage, to a screenless type. So here we've got a couple of different options and a couple of different items. This right here is the two-stroke screenless air filter cage. This is a KTM part, and if you put this on your bike, you don't have the back, it's not the backflow, but the hell do you call that? The backfire, yes, thank you, in there. And so that's probably not gonna really influence airflow that much. I have not airflow tested the two against each other, so there might be a little placebo effect here going on, which is fine. Look, let me just say this for the record. I am a fan of placebo effect power, placebo effect performance enhancers. If my confidence level goes up, if my belief in myself and my rideability and the power and performance of my bike goes up, then who's to say that it hasn't? So is this an upgrade over the screen type? Sure, why not? I have it on my bike, and I feel like I think it runs a little better. So if you want to go with the plastic version, you can get the KTM version of this. Here's a cool thing I have in my hand. This is from our buddy over at Chris at Moto Minded. This is a little disc. If you've ever had one of these wear through your filter all the way through, could happen, or just really deform the inside of your air filter, you can get this little guy and throw that on there, and that will disperse and spread that pressure across the air filter. And it's a nice little upgrade on if you're using the stock type cage, whether it's this two-stroke version or the four-stroke version. And so we like these a lot. And let me throw one other item at you. This is the PC Racing filter base gasket. When you put this on your Airbox, now what happens is you have this really cool neoprene material. It's kind of like wetsuit material, and that seals the air filter cage itself, the air filter's housing, against the back of this. And the claim, and it works really good, is that you don't need grease on your air filter anymore. And you know, arguably you kind of don't. There's a bit of a myth out there. If you run a dual stage filter, which is what these Twin Airs are, you get this nice, very close density foam, and this, you can run this without grease on it. So the myth that every filter needs grease doesn't really hold true anymore with these really nice dual stage, dual density air filters. But we like to put these on all our bikes anyway, and so it's a nice upgrade. It's a nice peace of mind sort of thing. We don't use grease. We put these on all the bikes. I've used the plastic ones just fine. We like these little air filter discs. This air filter, notice it happens to be black. This is the one that you would want to upgrade your air filter if you are going to do a screenless. This is a backfire proof, non-flammable. The material in here, the foam, is flame resistant. So if you get rid of the backfire screen, you should change your filter. This is a little better airflow filter, and it's flame proof. It's a backfire rated air filter, and so you would combine this with either the plastic KTM one, or Twin Air also makes this really super trick, nice aluminum cage. And so this is a kit. This is sort of like a power airflow upgrade kit. These two come together. You can get this separately to mate with your KTM style one, or you can get these together as a kit. One of the things is no flex. So this metal cage here, this is sort of a works type upgrade. All the Supercross guys are running this, desert racers. So if absolute assurity and confidence on your air filter is a must, then this is a nice way to go. This is more of a budget version of doing the exact same thing, but getting the same net result. And then we talked about this. Let me see. So that is probably all of the, we covered the exhaust. We talked about engine management stuff. And so here we've got air intake stuff. We've talked about the boots, the air filters themselves. Lots of myths out there about what these things do and don't do, and so I hope we've clarified that for you. If you have any other suggestions for us, please let us know in the comments. It's our pleasure to serve you. It's our pleasure to help answer your questions. If you bought your product from us or from anyone else, it's all good. We don't care. We're not going to shame you or give you a hard time with your tech support question just because you didn't source your product from us. We're more than happy, willing to get your brap on, get you back on the trail. We want to make sure that you're enjoying this sport, that you're getting everything you can out of this sport. And if there's anything we can do to help you, we're super happy to do it. So thanks for watching our videos. Please let us know in the comments if you have any other video suggestions, or if we got anything wrong and you need to correct us, do it. We make mistakes all the time, and we're happy to hear the truth and set us straight. Please like and subscribe, and go out there and get some adventure.